Welcome to the Monday Minute of the Hunt Backcountry podcast. As usual, these are shorter and more informal episodes where we answer your listener questions. Steve, how are you this morning?
Good. Yeah. Okay. Kind of a nice lazy weekend with the family, just chilling, hanging out. Been kind of crummy-ish weather here in Boise, just kind of 40 degrees, a little rain, snow mix. So the getting out, getting any training, at least right around my house was kind of impossible. So a couple Peloton rides and yeah.
That is, I think, the worst thing is when it's just wet but not frozen, just because trails are a mess. It just makes it hard to get out, whether you want to hike, bike. You can't snowshoe, obviously, because it's just wet, precip. You don't have the snow like you did a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a crummy, like dry springs are, well, awesome for getting out and hiking in the Boise foothills. This kind of weather is pretty miserable. Most of the trails are going to be shut down.
Well, before we dive into some listener questions, just wanted to give a few timely updates. Next week, we will be taking off for the Hunt Expo in Salt Lake City, the Western Hunting and Conservation Expo, to give the full name. Again, we'll have a booth there. I believe it's 4430, if I remember correctly.
We're same exact spot we were last year. So if you were there last year, same spot.
So yeah, I hope to see many of you there. And then we have mentioned this in the past, but just to keep communication flowing. Unfortunately, the Pacific Northwest Sportsman Show, which we also normally attend, is the same exact dates as Hunt Expo, and we just can't be in both places at once. And so we're going to be at Hunt Expo. We will not be at that Portland show, but we will have packs in the Born and Raised booth. There'll be a display pack, and then also over at the P and Wild booth, another display pack. So again, we won't have our full presence. We won't have packs to try on, things of that nature. But if you guys are attending that show, look for those packs again with either Born and Raised or Peeing Wild. And on that pack, there's going to be a special QR code where you can sign up and get a special offer. So even though we won't be there, if you are interested in just seeing a display pack or potentially interested in buying with a special offer at Portland, again, go look for the pack there, scan that QR code, and it will get you taken care of. So it's gonna be fun to see a bunch of you guys at Hunt Expo. So yeah, be sure to stop by whether you want to check out a pack or just say hey. It'd be great to see you. And then speaking of events, Steve, this one is a bit further out, but we do have a final date and location for the golf tournament, right?
Yeah. Yep. So it was going to be the end of June out at Falcon Crest, and then we had our first like sit down meeting with them and discovered that they're going turn it into a private golf course in the coming years. And it was a big bummer, one, that's like one of my favorite courses to golf around here, and two, just, it's like yeah, it just seems like everything's getting, more expensive, less accessible, and it's a perfect example of one where it's going to go turn to private and you'll never be able to golf it again unless you happen to be a resident that lives out there, know somebody to get on. So, started looking for new golf courses, found Shadow Valley Golf Course is another one that I always really enjoyed playing. Had a meeting with them last week and we got a date set for July 12th. So that's a Friday out there. And then Thursday night, we're going to do like a pre-party at Top Golf. So, yeah, July 12th for the golf tournament. Starting to, I don't really have a goal for when we'll get registration up for this, but we'll certainly keep everybody in the loop. I would say, I don't know, no later than, sometime in March, I would say we'll have it all up and done and they'll get registered, and imagine it's something will sell out pretty quick. So if that's still something you're interested in, shoot me an email, kind of get you on a list and keep you notified that way as well.
I don't know if I'm jumping the gun by asking this, Steve. When because we had talked with this golf tournament about, any money raised, like going to something, going to a project,
Hmm.
a charity, etc. And I know that you and I had a conversation with someone that was offline about some potential. Is that something we can share, talk about yet, or think that's the direction we may go?
Well, yeah, I mean, so we talked with Idaho Fish and Game about seeing if they had any kind of projects that needed funding, something that would go. I think my issue sometimes with things is just not knowing where the money goes or how much of the money actually makes it to the cause, right? A lot of things are run. You know, let's say opposite of Exo as far as like they're not very efficient, right? So maybe say you donate $100, like 10 of that actually ends up getting somewhere that does real good. And so that I've always been like leery of certain ones, certain charities or whatever. Let's we're doing like a pet project, doing some type of project where like I can 100% like we'll get a bunch of people, myself included, guys here at Exo, will donate the time and find a project that needs like funding and make sure it happens and goes to, something where you get to really see the result from, right?
Yeah. Yeah, like
So
direct on
we'll
the
we'll see.
ground habitat
Yeah,
improvement or something.
yeah, something. But just to elaborate any further, I don't have any details yet. That's yeah, just still in the early stages.
Cool. Yeah, it'll be fun to explore that stuff. It's something that we haven't directly done in that manner, so it'll be fun to learn about the process and what's possible for sure. To dive into listener questions for today, we had one about sleep systems, which we've talked plenty about. Part of the question is about synthetic versus down, which again, we've talked about. But I liked this question because it came through and it was very specific. And as I've mentioned before, when we have a very specific question, we can try to dive into that more specifically with a more specific answer versus just general, hey, down versus synthetic type of discussion. So I'll go ahead and read it. He said, I have a sleeping bag question for you guys. I'm headed to the North Brooks Range to hunt caribou in the last week of August. We will be transported in and we'll be using a Cabela's Alaska Guide Series tent for our base camp. I feel confident we will stay in th- sorry. I feel confident we will stay dry inside that tent. So I feel like it would be fine to use my catabatic down quilt. However, I am also confident that we will end up getting wet at some point while being out hunting. Is down or synthetic better for drying out clothes while sleeping? What has your experience been with both down and synthetic while in wet conditions? So again, he was specific to say where is he going, which is North Brooks
Hmm.
Range. When is he going? Late August. Logistics such as transport. It's they're flying in, they're getting dropped, they have a base camp, this is the shelter, etc. So with all of those specifics in mind, Steve, if you were doing that very specific hunt, what would you do for sleep system?
I can't answer this in any educated way because I haven't used a synthetic sleeping bag since 20 years ago. And then to my knowledge, you did. I don't. I was like, as he was reading this question, my mind started wandering. At you obviously took synthetic on your mountain goat hunt.
Yeah,
You took a synthetic enlightened equipment quilt, correct?
correct. For goat, yeah.
Correct. Um, I don't know if we've ever really followed up on that, and if you're gonna use that again this year. So what do you got to?
Yeah, I thought that his question was interesting with all those specifics. He mentioned, he thinks he'll be fine carrying his down or versus catabatic. He actually didn't outright say, should I do that? Is that a good idea? What would you do? He then transitioned to talk about is down versus synthetic better for drying out clothes, which
Hmm.
is a general question, not necessarily related to his specific scenario. So, yeah, if I was doing this specific hunt, I would take my down catabatic quilt. That is what I took on my sheep hunt more recently in Alaska. Whereas the year prior for the goat hunt, I did use that enlightened equipment synthetic bag. Um, at the end of the day, I would have been fine on that specific goat hunt with down, but I did uh, see enough possibility where the synthetic did make sense for that goat hunt. But again, to go back to being specific, on that goat hunt, it was a totally different part of Alaska than the Northern Brooks. It was a totally different style of hunt, meaning we weren't in a base camp. We didn't have a big guide series tent. We weren't staying mobile. We weren't flying in. And I bring that up because for this guy with flying in, since he's not backpacking, for example, as we were on the goat hunt, he's going to be able to have a little bit more gear with him. He's not going to be
Hmm.
as have to be as weight conscious. So the reason that matters for things like his sleep system would be he can have extra layers. So for this guy, if he is out hunting during the day and gets wet, yes, he may or may not want to and may or may not need to use his sleep system at night to dry out his clothes. But another opportunity he's going to have is, oh, I can get back to base camp. I probably can have a dry base layer or even like another dry mid layer with me. So it's not going to be necessarily as critical for him in his context to dry out his clothing using his sleep system because he can probably have extra clothing. Whereas if it were a backpack hunt like my goat hunt was, and again in a totally different part of Alaska that's known to be uh, much wetter, it was obviously more critical for me to think through things like, oh, what if we are drenched? What if I do have to fully dry out? What if not only I get wet one day, but it's wet like day after day after day? And so again, the specificity really matters. Even on the goat hunt to go to that one, not only is it known to have rain, but you're in coastal Southeast Alaska, so you're just generally in a much higher humidity, damp environment, which means even if you get wet and it stops, raining, there's no precipitation, the conditions atmospherically are such that things just don't dry well. And so it can be more critical to have synthetics, whether that's clothing or sleep systems, because things just don't dry out very well there. And so you spend day after day after day there, and it's not necessarily one direct exposure of moisture to down, but it's this prolonged buildup of moisture that then doesn't dry out well in that specific environment. So yeah, long story short, if I was doing what he was doing, I would take a catabatic quilt. I took a catabatic quilt on my sheep hunt. We got wet. I have used it to dry out clothing to get to his question. To answer more directly his question, does down or synthetic work better for drying out clothes? Synthetic will work better, but that doesn't mean that you can't use down. Um, so yeah, I do again just like thinking through the specific scenario and not just having a general question of is down better or synthetic better? I'm going to Alaska. Try to take down or synthetic. Well, what are you doing in Alaska? Where, when, how? All that stuff matters.
Yeah, sounds like he already has the catabatic quilt. Certainly I'm going to echo a lot what you just said here as far as the flight service he's using is going to give him a weight limit of 75 pounds of gear and weapon, right? So he should have plenty of room to pack extra clothes, like you mentioned. So he's gonna be able to fly in with a whole extra set of clothes and then, hang up his wet clothes in the tent to dry out the overnight and just wear dry clothes is not going to be that much of an issue. And then one one note I do have, because this is from some personal experience, I've been on two caribou hunts up there in the Brooks. The wind can be absolutely just I don't know, it's just insane. Just sustained like 40-mile-an-hour winds that don't, it's not like down in Idaho you get like, 10 to 15, 20, and then they'll gust. Like I've never been anything like that up there where there was no gust. It was just like 40 miles an hour, like steady. Pretty crazy. But the very first trip we had like 2 or 3 days that we lost to wind, and then we started because the tents, like making sure this would just depend on where how confident you feel that your tent is staked out. But we started packing up. We had dry duffels. We started packing up, just loosely throwing in our sleeping bag and extra clothes and all that inside the duffel, and then just sealing that up. And then before we left camp, that way, if we were gone all day and we came back, we knew everything was dry. So uh, if or sorry, the wind hadn't blown the tent away and your sleeping bag was, a mile across the freaking tundra. So
Yeah.
that would be just with the down, even in particular, that would be very just pay attention to that your tent is staked down really, really well. And then when you do leave, throw stuff back in whatever you brought it out there into the field with, and grabbing a like waterproof duffel or at least very water resistant would be a very good idea just to you are in Alaska. No help is coming immediately. You got back to camp at dark that night and found your stuff all across the tundra, that could make for a pretty miserable night.
Great advice. Shifting gears, Steve, this question comes through and I'm sure we've mentioned this on the podcast. I can't say that we have, but I'm just sure we have because I've seen it questions and hadn't thought about it in a while. But someone asked and basically wrote in with almost a request and said, I want the lid of the K4 5000 to be able to be used as a detachable day pack. And then he went on to say, that is the only thing that keeps me from buying your pack, which is a strong statement and also felt like saying, okay, maybe for someone like that, we should clarify that it's not going to happen and why, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the want for it, right? Um, the EXO, we've talked about this a lot, right? That the reason we started EXO was to build a pack that was light and comfortable enough to wear all day long, that you never like, transitioning back to used to have a frame pack that, if you're backpacking, you'd hike in and you'd set up a base camp and you had a little day pack attached to that. Like, it's going back 20 years ago. Um, because the frame pack was just miserable to hunt in all day long. And then but you'd still have it kind of with you to where, the goal was to build something that was completely capable of, again, being comfortable all day long. And the second you kill something, you're instantaneously hauling meat. Um, that there's no like, oh, I got to go back to the truck or I got to go back to camp and get the meat carrier. I have to haul out a small load now. Like to me, it's just a huge loss of time and efficiency. You're burning a lot of energy to get back to get wherever you got to get to your pack frame where you can actually start hauling meat. So that's like the premise of EXO, and I kind of have stuck with that, right? For on K3 we did have that our thing called the Slurpee Stalker, which certainly has applications, and maybe that's what this guy's looking to do. Where there are certainly times where you want to drop your pack and sneak that final 300-400 yards into an animal. And I understand that argument, but at the end of the day, that's just, for me to take a lid and convert it into something that's like a fanny pack. For it to be functional, you'd have to change the design of the lid quite a bit and then add, you've got, it seems silly, but you got 3-4 ounces at a bare minimum of extra straps and buckles to make that happen. And that's just, with such a focus on, keeping weight to a minimum, uh, and really just having the essentials of what you need back there. Just not something that's high on my priority list. So
It's one of those situations where if you tried to make a lid into a fanny pack, you would end up with probably a pretty poor lid and a pretty poor
or a
fanny
fanny
pack or
pack.
day
Yeah,
pack,
yeah,
right? So it's
yeah,
like,
for sure.
do you want a good stocking pack or day pack? Or do you want a good lid? Because you can't really have both and do each one of those well in one physical
Yeah,
product in this
yeah.
instance. I think it'd just be a compromise of it doesn't do either one great, but you can, use it as either or, but not exceptionally well.
And I'd say like 9 times out of 10, when I drop my pack for a stock, I end up regretting it, right? Because the animal moves and then you follow it and you follow it. I've had multiple stories, where I've archery hunting deer early, in August or early September, and all of a sudden you end up like 800 yards away from your pack and you're barefoot because you took your boots off to do the stalk, and it's definitely like I try to keep that pack on. The only time I would take it off would be like stalking a mule deer or something like that. And I try to keep that thing on until the very last moment. And it is nice to, if you got to sneak, your hands and knees crawling, or I'm like vividly remembering this one buck I killed, right? Or I'm like literally like rock climbing down this little rock cliffy thing to get into position to shoot this buck, and like I couldn't have done that with a pack on. So yeah, I understand the guy's point and where he's coming from. It's just not something that like fits within the ecosystem of EXO at this current time. So
This question could be a giant like hour-long discussion. Maybe it should be, but I also say that knowing that I feel like we're going to revisit some of these topics and some of the podcast ideas that you and I've had, Steve, and kind of that content project we've talked about. But to touch on it briefly for guys who maybe want a more timely answer, this guy wrote in and said, I've watched your rifle journey over the last 5+ years. You guys both started with some factory rifles, have upgraded some factory rifles, and then moved to custom rifles. So he said, do you regret the time and money you spent on previous rifles and wish you had gone straight to the full custom route? And then he went on to say, I'm trying to spend more time improving my shooting to be more effective in the 3 to 400 yard ranges with my rifle. He said, I'm considering upgrading a factory rifle, and it is in a more traditional cartridge of 270 Winchester. It seems that from where I'm at in my shooting journey, this may be a worthwhile rifle, even if I do build another gun someday in a more modern long range capable offering, such as one of the PRCs. Thank you for any thoughts you have and appreciate the work you guys put into the podcast. So, again, there is a lot there, but I wanted to pull out a few things in that. For me, do I regret starting with the factory rifle, or in his email, he got more specific on the Tika that I built and upgraded over time. Do I regret that?
Mhm.
No, not at all. Not absolutely. Do I regret going, or do I wish I went straight to a full custom? No, definitely not. Because the main reason, because if you do that without experience of other rifles, you're probably going to build a custom rifle without knowing exactly what you want, meaning you haven't gone through the process of learning what you do and don't like, the specific things that you want, not just what a builder says you should have or what you read about online, but truly what you want. If you don't go through that process, you're probably going to regret slash wish you made some changes to a full custom build. So I don't recommend going straight to a full custom build. But I also wanted to say in his question, more important than rifles, he said, I'm trying to spend more time improving my shooting to be more effective hunting in the 3 to 400 yard ranges, which I think is honestly where most hunters should be. That's a good range to want to extend to, be capable at. But the key thing is there, spend more time. I, like for those ranges, 3 to 400 yards, it probably, with few exceptions, if you have a semi-decent rifle, you probably don't need to do anything in terms of spending money and just actually spend more time. Like work on technique, spend time, shoot, spend money on ammo, maybe upgrade an optic depending on what you have, things like that. You probably don't need to make a massive rifle change for that distances. And even if you do make a rifle change, again, none of that matters. You could have the greatest custom rifle ever. If you don't spend time with it, doesn't matter. So, and I'll also say, especially for the 3 to 400 yard hunting range, like if that's what you're going to be at, a full custom rifle is definitely not needed. I can't even say that my full custom rifle was any more quote unquote accurate than my Tika was. My Tika shot fantastic and really to hunt at 3 to 400 yard ranges. All the stuff you see on the internet about tiny groups is one, usually not totally relevant or accurate, period, but just does not matter, especially for hunting at 3 to 400 yards. And nor does I think his cartridge. Yeah, I mean he's shooting at 270. Like you're totally fine. Keep shooting that 270. You can be completely proficient to 3 to 400 yards with time and practice, and probably outshoot a lot of guys who maybe have a much quote unquote nicer rifle but don't spend time. So just want to bring that up. But Steve, I know you've been like some of the content project stuff, maybe diving more into rifles and doing like we've talked about doing more budget build stuff, things like that. It'll be fun to see where that goes.
Yeah, um I haven't been around a bad shooting rifle yet. I know it sounds, I don't know what that even looks like, to be honest with you. Like we started, how many years ago did we Weatherby, we use those Weatherby Vanguard backcountry, I believe. And with
Probably
factory 143 ELDXs, that was a 270. I shot, I mean, I was actually um, one of those deals where my phone popped up memories, right? And it was a memory, a photo of a group I took. It was like a 5 shot group, all like 3/4 MOA, at 100 yards, just absolutely dialed. And then And then yeah, I've had four rifles now from there to what I've got. Every single one shoots certainly sub MOA. Um, and I've been around like a lot of, friends are getting gun like everybody I know that has a gun just they all shoot sub MOA. So I've actually come around. I think rifles and factory ammunition and the tolerances and what these guns are being produced at a very high level right now with a lot of precision that whether it's a $600 factory gun or a $6,000 custom gun, I definitely that gap has narrowed substantially to where you could certainly have a good factory Tika or even these SIG crosses. I guess that's a factory rifle, but what are they like $1,500, something like that?
Yeah, somewhere in there.
But those things shoot lights out to where I think you could have a good factory gun that shoots better than a full custom gun. But you're talking tiny little differences here. So yeah, part of that part of the content project was like I was half joking around, like it'd be fun to do like a Walmart, quote unquote Walmart hunt, where it's like go to Walmart, buy absolutely everything you need and go hunt. Because it's like certainly with like you could probably get a pretty quality rifle and factory ammunition and go out and shoot really, really well with it. I think yeah, the whole rifle world, it gets, like a lot of things, it gets pretty silly, right? You're splitting so many freaking hairs. Um, and people just get lost in the weeds on what really matters. And at the end of the day, get a weapon, get familiar with it, shoot it a lot, and then whatever you have confidence in that weapon, that's going to far outweigh any benefits from like a full custom rifle versus factory or something. But maybe in this guy's case, he's got a 20-year-old, 270 and yeah, like buying maybe not even a custom gun, but just going and buying a brand new rifle, a brand new 270 with some of the advancements they've made in machining and creating tighter tolerances and stuff like that. He's going to see some pretty big improvements. But
Hmm.
um, I don't know what would you say matters, right? I mean, really good rings, really good scope, um, probably a brake or suppressor.
Yeah,
Like,
what
what I mean? What if you
matters?
had checked, yeah, if you had a
Yeah, I think
checklist of like these are the things that have to be there, what's that to you?
what matters downrange is essentially ammo in a barrel. Like, if you have a
Mm,
good shooting barrel and a really crappy, quote unquote crappy, I don't obviously mean it's crappy, but like if you have a good shooting barrel, because when people think of what matters, they're typically thinking of like accuracy, consistency, group size, etc. So like at the end of the day, if you have a barrel that shoots certain ammunition or certain bullet well, that's where it all starts, right? Like you could have a great custom action and a barrel that doesn't shoot, and then you could have vice versa. You could have a barrel that shoots lights out and like a cheap action that's rough or, isn't as smooth or what have you. So from like that's where it starts because that's the capability of like the system itself. But then you start funneling that down, I think, to okay, well the barrel with this bullet or with this ammunition is capable of shooting groups, but am I? So and then that's where it comes into like other components like stock choice, things like that. So can I get behind this rifle comfortably? Can I shoot it consistently from different positions? And so then you're talking about fitting kind of that rifle to you in a way that you're comfortable, in a way that you're repeatable shooting it from different positions. And then I think to your point, Steve, like mentioning things like action or scope rings and scopes, that's like going to be more okay, in the field, I need to make sure it's reliable, repeatable. It's not going to lose zero. It's going to be able to take some bumps and still maintain, its zero and deliver. So there is multiple ways that I think different components, or I should say there's different reasons that different components matter, right?
mhm.
But at the end of the day, if you just start with something that has some mechanical, by that I just mean the system is capable of shooting accurate. and then now introduce you as the shooter, being able to get behind that and use the rifle's capability and accuracy consistently. So things like how do you fit? How comfortable are you? And then things like quality components that are going to ensure, okay, this rifle is accurate and I'm accurate, but now is it repeatable, reliable? Can it take some bumps, on a hunt, that type of thing? And so that's where you get in my perspective, more into like scopes and rings and stuff like that. So, I mean, I think one thing, there's so many good factory offerings. I totally agree with you, Steve. Like there's like a heyday. It's like there's never been a better time to buy a rifle off the shelf.
Yeah.
When you start going into custom, what you get isn't something more accurate, but you start getting more options, meaning, well, maybe I want to shoot a different cartridge, or maybe I want to shoot a different barrel length. Maybe I know I'm going to want to upgrade, a stock immediately or get into a chassis because I want a folder, etc. And one thing to realize is like you can start with a Tika and shoot it, and maybe over the course of, a few years with making changes, you could end up spending as much on upgrading a Tika as you would have spent on a full custom from the very beginning because you're like, oh, I got a Tika, but now I want a chassis. Now when I change my chassis, I want, a different magazine system. Now I want, a different shorter barrel. I'm going to change the trigger. Like at the end of the day, you may have spent much as a full custom over that time, but I also think that that's almost a benefit because you don't have to sink all the cost in right away, right? Like if you're going to end up spending, call it 4 grand on a Tika, maybe you do that over the course of, 4 years and you don't have to fork out 4 grand up front. But also you just may start that process and go, yeah, maybe I will upgrade a barrel later, but heck, maybe I won't, right? Like you're just not
Hmm.
as fully committed. And I think at the end of the day, the system is going to be essentially the same capability either way. But you just can't walk in right now off the shelf and go, I want a factory rifle that maybe has a more obscure barrel length or, there's
Yeah.
obviously are
Yeah.
more options with chassis and stuff like that these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I just don't the idea of that custom means better from a performance perspective is if people think that way, that's
Well, yeah.
probably
I mean, that's historically probably true, but at this point, it's that gap is really tightened up.
well, more to come on that, guys. We got actually a lot of just to like give you a peek behind the scenes. One thing that we've talked about this year, Steve and I, we've had this conversation, but to let listeners know is we realize we've been doing the podcast for so long, and a lot of times we think to ourselves internally, oh, we've talked about that before, but
Yeah.
there's so much that we plan to revisit because either things have changed or our perspective has changed, etc. And I mean that like about big things, maybe like building a rifle, but also about very small things. So just to let listeners know, you guys know, we plan to revisit a lot of stuff, even if we've talked about it in the past, and just take fresh looks at a lot of components, gear, and other things in the coming year. So it's going to be fun to revisit some things and go, yeah, we talked about that 4 years ago, but what's different or what's changed or what still is relevant about that and what we said, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, let us know what you guys want to hear. We are planning to just dive deep into a lot of cool stuff this year and would love to make sure that that includes what you guys listening want to hear. So let us know. As always, just send an email to podcast@exomountaingear.com. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to hit subscribe or follow if you haven't yet. This week's full length episode is releasing on Wednesday, and it is with Montana um, Fish Parks and Wildlife to continue our state series that we've been doing. Montana is definitely a state we had a lot of interest in and questions about, and that's releasing this week. So, again, just make sure you're subscribed. You'll get the episode and let us know by sending an email if you got any questions, topic suggestions, etc. We'll talk to you soon.